Hi, I'm Psipher. Welcome back. As you can tell by today's title for the video, we're dealing with a very serious topic that I know is not very easy to discuss, but this has been requested by multiple friends, especially by Dio or Deoxy, to help out with the Leggy group for those who need help managing their emotions and thoughts, especially relating to suicidal ideation. Of course, anyone is free to take the advice from this video in their life. They don't have to be part of this group for obvious reasons. But today, what I'd like to do is apply a summary taken from the book Helping the Suicidal Person by Stacey Freedenthal, where we will be dividing this topic up into maybe approximately 5 or 6 videos to make this easier to digest. There's a lot of ground to cover, but again, this is not going to be for the faint of heart. This is obviously a topic that can touch heartstrings for multiple people. If you are not comfortable with the topic of suicide and suicidal ideation, I do not recommend watching this video. Otherwise, if you have a strong motivation to be helping people, mostly your friends, that are dealing with suicidal ideation and you want to be able to help them, some of the advice in these videos may hopefully help you. It is also a topic that most people don't even know where to begin, understandably, where a lot of people kind of freeze up and lock up, not knowing what to do. But I also want to make very clear here that, one, I am not a doctor, and two, most likely you are not a doctor, and it is not your responsibility to be psychologically treating your friend or even a stranger if they're dealing with suicidal ideation. But knowing just enough about how to interact with a suicidal person might actually save their life, or at least delay potential suicide. A big end goal is to get someone to a doctor when possible. Remember, you are not a person's doctor. So what we will begin with is mental preparation before you encounter a suicidal person. Hopefully someone that is not actively in the act of committing suicide immediately in front of you, but someone who is thinking about acting upon such thoughts in the short term or very soon. So for the mental preparation that we need, one of the first things we need to be aware of is that everybody approaches the topic with a particular bias for suicide. A lot of people may think of suicide as cowardly. Others may think of it as very sinful. Others may see it as selfish. And in other ways, some people will think of it as actually very courageous or acceptable. There's a whole spectrum involved with this, but it usually tends to have a negative connotation in most cultures, understandably. But what you must not do is push whatever your particular bias is upon the person that you are trying to help. What you want to do is validate that person's emotions, and you want to also ask them to be willing to tell you if their thoughts on suicide will change in the future, so that way you can help monitor the change in their thoughts over time. Especially if they come to a moment of crisis, that they will feel safe to come to you, or at least to someone they trust, to open up, to explain what they're feeling in that given moment. You also must never claim the person is wrong regarding their suicidal feelings or that they think suicide is an option. Do not tell them that they are wrong thinking that. Don't denigrate them. It will make the situation much worse for them. They will become much more isolated. 3 key things here: empathize, sympathize, and validate them. You want to understand that they are indeed suffering and that you take them seriously and that you do understand that they're in a very dark place. Now, if you yourself are feeling suicidal, you can obviously offer empathy to another suicidal person, but you probably need to get help yourself first. If you're emotionally compromised in some way, you are not going to be in a position to be helping someone. So what you should do is you want to be able to meet a mental health professional first for yourself and deal with your problems first. But if you are in such a situation, you know another person is being suicidal, get help. Another thing to be keeping in mind before you encounter someone with suicidality is not to have any fear about it. I know there is a lot of fear regarding, well, what if this person dies on my watch? What if I can do nothing about it? Am I going to get in trouble for it? Whatever happens is going to happen. You're not going to be able to control everything. You need to have this mindset where you're in a comfortable middle ground between being immobilized by your fear and overreacting to the person. You also don't want your fear to force you to push the suicidal person onto someone else in order to make your problem someone else's burden. I would only recommend that if you know another person is much more skilled than you at interacting with a suicidal person, or if they're a mental health professional. Especially if you're not feeling up to the task or adequate for that situation. Another thing to keep in mind is that you may feel a lot of negativity towards a suicidal person if you think they are purposefully trying to annoy or bother you. There are a lot of scenarios where this occurs where a person might feel manipulated or resentful towards a suicidal person when that particular suicidal person has been experiencing what is known as chronic suicidality. It's very easy to feel frustrated with such people if they do not appear to be improving, especially with their emotional regulation skills, or if they're constantly using suicide as a means to gain your attention or your love. But one way to kind of deal with this, assuming they're not being manipulative at first, is to think of being suicidal as a process that is happening to a person rather than being something a person does. Any advantage the person has from this process of being suicidal, such as getting more attention and control, is usually a byproduct rather than a conscious intent for manipulation. Many suicidal people will engage in such behaviors simply because it works to get support and love from other people, and it's probably the only way that they know of. But in many cases, if the person does want to improve, they may just simply not know what else to do, and they don't have the other coping skills necessary. However, one warning I should give you, people who tend to have borderline personality disorder and also potentially narcissism will most likely be out of your league in this regard. They will have a tendency to use suicidality if it benefits getting attention from you. At that point, you are going to need professional help, and I would not recommend getting involved in those particular situations. Another thing you need to be aware of before engaging with the suicidal person is that you must not see yourself as a person's savior. You're going to experience burnout if you do this. It's not your job to go in and save them, especially if you're chronically jumping into different people's lives just to be the white knight, to constantly save them and just to feel good about it. Don't do that. You are going to start hurting yourself and potentially also hurting the suicidal person emotionally in the long run, especially if you burn yourself out to the point to where you don't have enough emotional energy to lend yourself to another person when trying to help them. You want to be firm but compassionate with a person and establish very clear boundaries when you can provide help and support, and to what degree you can give that help and support. Only relax these boundaries when you reasonably think it will help the person without creating a dependency. Again, if you are not sure about what to do, ask for help. Go get an adult. Go ask a mental health professional. If you've been working with the person for a very long time, or you expect yourself to be prone to thinking that it's going to be hopeless helping someone, keep in mind that the person is still alive and looking for help. Otherwise, they wouldn't be talking to you or another person in the first place. People do actually change and improve, and remission does actually happen, but it's hard. You do need to understand that it does take a lot of hard work, and that sometimes when things look hopeless, you just have to be able to wait alongside them till you get to the end of the tunnel. But it can take days, weeks, months, years in some cases. It depends on the person. Now, if you're not sure if a person is suicidal, it is much better to know if a person is than not know in the first place. There is no evidence of a social contagion effect wherein if you ask a person if they're suicidal, that somehow it makes them suicidal. There's no evidence of that. You're not going to infect them with suicidality. If they start being resistant towards you or feeling angry or upset, help them process those emotions. Talk with them about why they feel that way, about why they may not want to discuss it. But you would rather want to know if they're feeling that way. And you also want to explore if they have been exhibiting other, like just other suicidal behavior in general, such as writing a note, like a farewell note, or saying goodbye to people. Any behavior that essentially tips you off. If you feel uncomfortable asking them directly, what you can do is very gently ease your way into that discussion to give them very gentle questioning, such as like, how was your day? How are you feeling? Has life been tough recently? Are you experiencing any negative thoughts or emotions? Have you been engaging in self-harm? Before, you can ask those questions before you can start asking directly about their suicidality.